a side effect of discipline. What I want to challenge, and then we're going to spend a little bit of time illustrating, I want to challenge you to think of discipline as the inner strength to make yourself do what you ought to do. And that's called self-discipline, when you can make yourself do what you ought to do. We as adults spend much of our life struggling to be self-disciplined. And we may have it in some parts of our life and not in other parts. And we're constantly trying to grow that into different parts of our life. With a child, they begin life naturally without discipline. They begin life responding freely and completely to physical stimuli. They're wet and it's starting to burn them, and they want something to be fixed, so they make noise. And if they have an alert parent, the parent comes, figures out why they're making noise, changes the diaper, maybe lotions down the burning part. They feel better, might even get comforted by being held a little bit. Okay, life's good. There's no discipline there.
Well, there is. But it's the parents. Yeah, in the beginning
I think that's one of the coolest things about kids. From the very first day of life, this little being that has no understanding about what's going on all around it begins to make adults do its will. That is so cool. And then adults spend years trying to learn to quit doing the will of the child and to get the child to do the parent's will. And then you have this battle of wills that's set up. And in the process, we lose the concept of discipline. So it's more often, who's going to be in control, the parent or the child? Well, we know it really kind of needs to be the parent, because the child is going to stick their finger in the electrical socket. The child's going to go stand in the middle of the street to see what happens. The child's going to touch that hot stove just to see why it's that color. The child's going to do all kinds of things. I mean, you know, the fire in the fireplace, they're going to want to crawl up in it to see it close. So many things that are natural stimuli a child is going to want to respond to that will, frankly, kill it or damage it seriously. And then just when it seems like we're getting on top of these natural urges for self-destruction, a child becomes a teenager, and it starts all over again.
Is there a sweet spot?
Yes.
And
there is a sweet spot.
And we'll cover that in the second half tonight.
Yeah, and when your child hits it, you need to enjoy it for all it is worth. Because it's short, it's 5 years long, and you need to enjoy that. And if you have multiple kids, the odds are you won't ever get them all in the sweet spot at the same time, but maybe you will.
If you have them real close together like we did.
Yeah, we did for
About 3 years.
maybe, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was good. We didn't know that was the sweet spot. It
Nobody
helps to know
told
it's
us.
a sweet spot
Yeah.
so you can really enjoy it.
We're in one now, though.
It's really sweet when they leave home,
Yeah.
especially when they leave home and quit asking for money. That's really good. So leaving home and then leaving home and quitting asking for money, there's usually a gap,
Yeah.
multi-year gap for us.
When do we get to ask them
What are we going to ask them?
for money? When do we get to ask the kids to give us money?
Oh, they've got it. We can start that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to start training our
We
kids.
need a Go Fund for just our kids to give us money.
Yeah. Well, I think we start sending them emails before birthdays and Christmas and just list out, okay, we need like $100 from each person, and then next year will be $150. And
Oh.
we'll just train them up.
Oh, okay.
This is kind of how you train children.
There you
Do it a
go.
little bit at a time.
That was totally free.
Yeah, but that's a good idea. I think I'm going to experiment with that and see what happens. And then the good kids will respond properly, and the bad kids will let them know, oh, y'all are the bad kids, and see if they do better the next time. Okay, back to discipline. If you adopt a a concept of discipline as something that's supposed to be self-will based. I am imposing will on myself to do that which is right. And what we're trying to do is instill that in our children. Then we bypass that whole conflict of wills between doing it my way versus you wanting to do it your way. And what it becomes is a gradual, multi-year transfer of discipline from me to my child. That's the concept of discipline I want you to think about. And so if you do it right, by the time you have an 18-year-old, they have sufficient discipline to leave home and keep themselves out of trouble. Sufficient discipline that they can get themselves up in the morning. Now, I've been hearing lots of interesting stories about the consequences of helicopter parenting now that many of these children who were helicopter parented throughout their childhood are in college. So it is common for many college kids to receive a phone call about 7 or 8 in the morning, every morning, to wake them up so they'll be able to get up and go to class. Because they have never in their life gotten themselves up without a parent telling them to get up.
It is real.
And so that's eventually going to go into the work world. You'll have to call them at the same time every morning to get them up to go to work. Because at no point have they been taught to do it themselves. That's just one of many different problems you have with helicopter parents who are trying to protect the child from the normal consequences of life and the normal duties and responsibilities of life.
And so much of what he's talking about goes back to yesterday when we talked about know your purpose in parenting. If your purpose is to raise our goal, a competent, confident Christian adult. That was our goal. To be able to raise a confident, competent Christian adult, we had to start them way back down here to get them there. They can't hit 17 and go, now you need to learn how to wash clothes and you need how to keep a job, and because you're going to go to college in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and we need you to know what you're doing. You got to start when they're younger. And you start building them in exactly what he said, the disciplines. Not the punishments, the disciplines, the structure, the getting them ready for it, all the way from the early ages.
So let's talk about consequences for a moment. Consequences are of 2 types, natural and artificial. Parents prefer artificial consequences, and rightfully so. An artificial consequence is when we decide if this child does this activity that we're trying to train out of them, this will be the consequence. And good parenting is when you have the rules so that they know this is the expected behavior, this is the consequence when you don't meet the expected behavior. So the child then realizes they're making a choice. Now, it's very important not to impose upon a child something they can't do. So if you have a 1-year-old and you have a serious consequence every time they dirty their diaper because they didn't go to the bathroom on the commode, that's child abuse. Because they are not capable at 1 to be potty trained. So the expectation and the consequences need to be age appropriate. Now, this is why we're going to talk about normal in the second half, but it kind of permeates all of this. Anything we do, we have to take into account the age and the ability of the child. And keep in mind, we're training and we're instilling self-discipline. So consequences we impose, because if we don't, eventually they will come out from under the umbrella of our safety, and they will experience natural consequences. Natural consequences don't love them like we do. Natural consequences don't show mercy. Natural consequences are often things that hurt us as much as it hurts our children. So we want to spare them natural consequences by providing artificial consequences just long enough for them to develop self-discipline. And then when they're out in the real world, they protect themselves. That's the theory we're advocating.
Now, that doesn't mean natural consequences still don't come their way. Because you can give them their choices and they still choose the wrong thing. And it's going to be a natural consequence. If you say, don't run out in the street, a car will hit you, and they run out in the street, God willing, the car won't hit them, but what if it does? That's a natural consequence. We can't always keep a natural one from happening, but if we give them enough guidance beforehand, then they get it so that we don't have to let them experience the natural.
Yeah, good example. I mentioned last night that I was the best tree climber in my neighborhood. Now, most of the time, climbing trees was not allowed. The times it was allowed is when I wasn't around my parents and they didn't know about it. So frequently, I would be climbing a tree, and one of my parents would discover that, and I'd be called down out of the tree to then receive the appropriate beating that they thought I deserved for climbing the tree. And then there was the time that I was way up in the top of not a really tall tree, but a tree that you weren't supposed to climb. We had this beautiful mimosa tree in the front of our yard. And I loved to climb it, and I, as a result, had encouraged many of the neighborhood kids to climb it. And my dad hated for kids to be in his prized mimosa tree. And so one day, there's probably about 10 of us kids up in that tree, and I'm at the very top. I mean, as far as the limbs would hold me. And I was on like 4 different limbs trying to have and it was moving, and I could see my dad's truck come around the corner. And I yelled, "Out of the tree!" And then I went to get out of the tree, and I slipped, and I fell about 15 feet, landed flat on my back. And my dad saw the fall. And he pulls up in the driveway, and I'm laying there on my back wondering, am I dead? I didn't feel anything. But then after a little bit, I realized I can't breathe. Okay, maybe I'm dead. My dad comes over and then bends over me and says, "Are you dead?" So that's where I got it from.
I know.
Okay. And I looked up at him and opened my mouth, and nothing came out. And he grabbed me by the shirt and kind of picked me up and dropped me, and I got a breath, and he picked me up and dropped me again. I got a breath. And I said, "I hurt." And he said, "Good, in the house." Okay, well, that was it. I didn't rupture anything. I should have, falling that far, flat on my back. Or if I did, it healed before we discovered it. That was a natural consequence. My dad was merciful. I didn't get a serious artificial consequence, which was appropriate. Because the natural consequence of landing on my back in a 15-foot fall was far more serious than anything he could have done to me. Now, do you want to show the video?
Yeah, the video's ready. Let's show the video.
Okay, we got something on discipline.
Yeah. I'm going to let you, we're going to sit down and let you watch it.
About Seattle, but where we live in Seattle. I don't know how much you know about Seattle, but where we live, it is legally frowned upon to spank your children. So if that's the only thing, you had in your parental toolbox, you might be in trouble. But I want you to know that I have combed through the laws. And as it turns out, there's tons of stuff that it is still legal to do to your children. And I'm going to share some of those with you tonight in case you are short on ideas, maybe for... Well, your kid's done wrong, and I bet that you witnessed. You tried to be chill, but they're so naughty you must diss. They slipped right off the track, and now you're trying to get them back. Before your cool done run out, I'll be giving you suggestions. Nothing can protect them but divine intervention. I reckon it's about your turn to teach something they'll learn. But you can't spank your kids no more, no more. It's like those kids Right now you're probably like, Amy, what can we do? So I'm gonna tell you. You can send them off to bed without a bite to eat, shave their head and eyebrows while they sleep. They'll wake up in the morning and know that they're loved, 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 loved. Write your mommy loves you on their forehead with a black Sharpie. Hem their pants an inch or 3. Send them off to school and they'll know that they're loved, 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 loved. But you can't spank your kids no more, no more. It's like those kids are yours. You can tell them that they're dying of a rare invasive tumor. Log into their Facebook page and start a nasty rumor. Find their diary, then read it, hey, tweet it. You can change their name to something really strange like JWoww, Snooki, Saddam Hussein. You're well within your rights. CPS won't fight it, but you can't spank your kids no more, no more. It's like those kids are yours. Until they change their mind and see like me, they'll open up their lunch, it's organ meat. One bite into a heart and they'll start to do their chores. So please don't, please don't, please don't. There's no need to graduate, cause money is short. And this'll college funds, not yours.
It's dark. Yeah. Okay, so we thought that would be just a little fun because sometimes it's hard to think of those consequences, those artificial consequences. And sometimes you're struggling to figure out, well, what will they do? I've heard this so many times. We've tried everything. You've tried everything? We've tried it all. We've beat them. We've starved them. We've made them go to timeout. They won't stay there. But we try. We put them in there, but they just come right back out. We sit on them. We hug them. We love them. We cry with them. And then they still don't obey. And part of that is because they didn't let the kid past the age of 2.5, 3 start having some control of themselves. Not control over you, control over themselves. Self-discipline. And you start giving that to them. When you start giving a kid the permission to be in charge of themselves, they love that. They think that's cool. And if they come to my office, I'm going to tell them that's what I expect of them. I had a 6-year-old in there about 3 weeks ago. Came in, Mom said, oh, he's great at school, he's great at church, but he walks in and he turns into demon child. He yells and he screams and he hits us and he says awful mean things to us and he's just awful. And he only does it at home, only at home. What are we doing wrong? I said, nothing. He loves you. And he knows you love him unconditionally. So all day long, he's been on his best behavior, and he's just been keeping that all in. And the moment he walks in the door, he goes, oh, I'm home, and explodes. Because he doesn't think he can control it. He thinks you're in charge of whether or not he's going to get in trouble about being mad. So I told him, Can you feed yourself? Yeah. Can you put your own clothes on? Well, yeah. Okay. And so can you get yourself up out of bed and get dressed, take care of everything you need, take care of you? Yeah. Can you bathe? I mean, does mom and dad have to? No, I can do that by myself. Awesome. You know what that means? You can be in charge of yourself. Mom and dad don't have to be. They love it when I say mom and dad don't need to be in charge of them. Because they think, woohoo, I just got away with everything. Then I tweak it a little. I tell them, like mom, dad yelling at you, no. Do you like timeout? No. Do you like it when they take your stuff away from you? Absolutely not. It's mine. I want it. Great. Do you want to keep all your stuff, not have timeout, not get in trouble, not get a spanking? Absolutely. Great. Then I'll tell you exactly how to do it. When they ask you to do something, do it. What? When they ask you to do something, do it. And then when you do it, you're in charge of you. You made the choice to do the right thing, the good thing. You're in charge of you, not mom and dad. Mom and dad don't get involved until you don't do the right thing. Then they have to step in and be the evil villain and take away all your toys and make you have reset. Have timeout and all that stuff. But if you don't want that to happen, you be in charge of you. You make good choices and you're in charge. Took him 3 weeks. Came in today, glowing report. Mom could not stop telling me how amazing this kid is. And I looked at him and I said, what'd you get out of it? And he goes, how'd you know? I said, what'd you get out of it? I got a bulletin board. I thought that was an interesting thing he wanted, but he wanted a bulletin. He wanted to hang his stuff up and not get in trouble for poking holes in the walls with push pins. And I said, you got a bulletin board? I sure did. That's awesome. Mom, why did you give him a bulletin board? Because he's been so awesome this week. You mean you were in charge of yourself? You made all the right choices. Mom and dad didn't have to do anything, and you got something for it? That worked out pretty good. But all of that boils down to he was in charge of himself.
It's a natural consequence. He was good. His parents liked it. They were able to do something nice for him that they would like to have done, which all of us would like to do for our children if they'll allow us the opportunity. I want to share with you something that I wished more parents would try, that should begin to be effective around 3 years of age and increases in effectiveness right up until your child leaves home, which you can't say about very many ways of disciplining. You ask your child if they understand what the expected behavior is. You see if they can figure out how come that's the expected behavior. Like with a 3-year-old, why are you not allowed to put the screwdriver in the wall socket? Well, I don't know, so maybe you demonstrate for them. Now, I'd use a rubber glove or something, but you demonstrate and watch it shoot across the room, sparks,
Your
smoke.
kids have done that, haven't they? And maybe. He did too. Mm-hmm.
I liked playing with electricity. There was a
He
lot
still
of things
likes
I learned
playing.
to do with electricity. Yeah. So you ask them if they understand the appropriate behavior. When you're confident they understand what the appropriate behavior is, then you say, what should be the consequences for not doing the appropriate behavior? So you're asking them, you're not imposing consequences, you're asking them. What should happen to you when you do wrong? One of our granddaughters, I asked her that once when she was 5, 4.
I don't know. We have 5. I'm shooting in the dark here on which one that might have been. Evie. Oh.
I asked her, just her and her mom were having this constant battle. And she felt, and timeout, she just hated timeout. I said, what do you think would be an appropriate consequence? And she's like, exercise. I said, really? She says, when I'm a mom, whenever my kids are bad, they'll have to exercise. I said, okay. So I shared that with her mom and went over like a lead balloon. But as she got a little bit older, that's how she began to discipline herself. When she felt like she'd done wrong, she'd go exercise. And she began to develop self-discipline by disciplining herself with exercise. And that actually works. I mean, it works for adults. And you're about to get in trouble doing something, stop, go exercise, go for a run, do push-ups, set-ups. I mean, the more obnoxious the exercise is, the more efficient it is. It can work with children. Ask them, because they know themselves. No telling what they're going to come up with. And the nice thing about them imposing consequences on themselves, this is adult-type behavior you're teaching them. So they have admitted this is the right behavior. They've admitted sometimes they don't do the right behavior, and they have come up with a consequence. Now you are in a position, instead of being the mean parent imposing consequences, you get to be the loving parent and impose mercy. My dad tells the story of one of his older brothers that got in trouble with his dad. His dad sent him outside to get a switch. He was about 12, I think, at the time this happened. And he came back in with a tree limb. And he handed it to his dad and said, "Please don't kill me." So he's ready to accept his consequences. He thought whatever he did was serious, but he didn't want to die for it. I never heard the rest of the story. I'd like to know what my grandfather did at that point. But obviously didn't kill him, because my uncle lived a lot longer after that. Invite your children to be part of the discipline process, because your ultimate goal should be to turn their life over to them completely by the time they're 18, knowing that they are fully capable of disciplining themselves. And that needs to begin around the age of 3. So you're starting that process, and as they're able to be responsible for things, you give that responsibility to them, like dressing themselves, like going to the bathroom by themselves. You know, hopefully not too long after that, they learn to brush their teeth, and then you may have to check from time to time. Did you brush your teeth? Is this toothbrush wet? Okay, the toothbrush is wet, but your breath stinks. What did you do with the toothbrush?
You might not want to know.
Yeah, you might not. But you don't want the natural consequences of the teeth falling out. So we don't want to pay the dental bills. You don't want to lose the teeth. What is a natural consequence for not brushing your teeth? And see what they come up with.
Alan's dad once told our kids, just brush the teeth you want to keep. And they were like, we want all of them. Then you better brush them all. And I love that. I'd be going, go in there and brush those teeth. You miss you. He just told them to brush the ones they wanted to keep. It worked. I use that all the time now.
And actually, at least one of her kids uses it with her children.
Because she's heard it enough.
Yeah. By the time a child is 12, they should be capable of getting themselves up out of bed and dressed on their own. And that's not with a parent coming in saying it's time to get up.
4 times.
That is with them setting an alarm, setting a phone, setting something to wake them up on their own, so the parents don't have to worry about getting them up. And then they get to choose whether or not they're going to get themselves up in time for breakfast. Now, with our kids, when we were hitting that point, we kept Pop-Tarts around. Now, I know that's not the healthiest breakfast, but they can eat it in the car or on the bus on the way to school. So if they didn't get up in time for breakfast, here's your breakfast. That's it. Now, if they got up in time for breakfast, they get something nicer.
I didn't say, here's your breakfast. They knew where it was. I didn't give it to them because they knew where it was. I didn't have to cook it. It was up to them if they wanted it hot. I didn't. They went and got it.
Okay, that's a little bit easier on them than she was.
Yeah.
That was the nice thing about co-parenting. Sometimes I was the tough parent, sometimes she was the tough
Yeah,
parent.
we played good cop, bad cop really well.
Yeah.
Okay. So you probably are getting a good feel of what we think about discipline. The way we are promoting it isn't necessarily the way, well, I know it wasn't the way I was raised. I wasn't raised in a household of choice. My grandma and grandpa raised me from the time I was 5 until I was 12, so the real raising years. It was their way, and I won't even say the highway. I didn't have that choice. It was their way or a spanking. And my grandpa's hand was about that big. He only spanked me once, but I swear it wrapped all the way around my body twice, because he's a big old hand. They ruled the home, and they ruled it in a very authoritarian manner. There was no options or questions. This is the law. That doesn't always work. And so we have to decide how we're going to parent. If that's how you're going to parent, then you're going to have to, at some point, be able to instill choice to your kids. You're going to have to get them to the point that they can make a choice and make it properly. Because if you're the one making all the choices, when do they learn how to make the choice that keeps them from getting in that car with those kids that have been drinking? When do they learn how to say no to somebody that wants them to go do something they know is wrong? If you've never taught them how to make a choice, because you've always told them exactly how to do it, they don't have the skills.
So if you start with the idea that you're going to show discipline, and one of the drawbacks to this is you need to kind of be disciplined yourself, because if you're living an undisciplined life, that's what you're modeling for your children, so they will naturally try to do that. But if you try to discipline yourself and you try to discipline your children with the idea you're teaching them discipline so they do it for themselves, then one of the ways you know it is every year you are less involved in making the kids do what they need to do. They are more involved in making themselves do what they need to do. And some of the tougher things are going to take longer. Yeah, I'm trying to sort through the things I don't want to talk about versus the things I want to talk about tonight. There's so many things we can cover when it comes to discipline, punishment, consequences. But if they have refreshments, this would be a good time for a break.
Look, they actually have something to drink out there.
And it looks like a package of cookies.
Maybe.
So the first 2 or 3 people that get there will get something to eat.
Oh, it's a whole package.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to eat just one cookie? I mean, we're adults.
Oh, disciplined.
I mean, I'd give a child 2.
Disciplined, right? Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break. Refreshments. Potty time. Okay, so 10 after, we'll start back.
Okay, go. Okay, y'all come on back in. Or not. Y'all are adults.
I know your mama enough to know nope.
I'm going to recommend a couple of books for those of you that want more guidance and discipline. Our current favorite parenting book is called Have a New Kid by Friday. It's a 5-day process. Have a New Kid by Friday. 5 days, step-by-step process of how to take control of your parenting. Now, it probably should be called Have a New Parent by Friday because it will change you as a parent.
Yeah.
But it will also change the child. But whether the child is behaving the way you want them to or not, your life is so much better after going through those 5 steps that for many of us takes a lot more than 5 days. But if you can do them in 5 days, you really will have a whole different home life.
And I would say this about it. The number one thesis of it is you quit taking on the responsibility of your kids' actions. Your kids need to take responsibility for their action, not you. If they're throwing a temper, have you ever been with someone when their kid threw themselves on the floor and started having a temper tantrum and the parents started apologizing to you for their have you ever apologized for your kid's temper tantrum in front of other people? Why? Are you throwing the temper tantrum? They're the ones throwing the temper tantrum, not you.
Okay, I'm going to tell a story.
Okay.
Okay, this is one of the times we actually did it right. We had a son.
We still have him.
Yeah, but he's a lot different now.
Oh, yeah. Who has a son?
He was, you know.
God
okay,
is good.
Parents. There's a saying among grandparents. Children are what God gives to your children to punish them for what they did to you. There is an incredible amount of truth to that. Because what you did that most drove your parents nuts, you can pretty well count on your children will do that to you. So we had this boy that was, as I remember it, somewhere between 4 and 5. Way too old to be behaving the way he was behaving. And we were at a shopping mall, and we were getting ready to leave. And they had this big merry-go-round in the middle of the mall. And he wanted to ride the merry-go-round. Well, it was like 11 o'clock in the morning. We'd gotten in there when the mall opened at 10, got our shopping done before it was going to get busy, and then we had a whole list of things we had to do that day, so we're leaving. There was a sign on the merry-go-round said it would start at 12. And he wanted to ride the merry-go-round. And we're like, well, it's not running right now. Well, I want to ride the merry-go-round. Well, it's not running right now. So we head out through this department store to get to the exit of the mall, and he's throwing a fit. You know, and I'm dragging him along. Sherry's got the girls. They're behaving. They wanted to ride the merry-go-round too, but they're behaving. He's throwing a fit, which really wasn't normally him.
No,
Usually it would have
that
been
was
one
an
of the
odd
girls,
behavior
but
for him.
he really wanted to ride that merry-go-round.
Which is funny because if he'd actually been picked up and put on it,
He would have thrown a fit.
he would have hated it.
Yeah, he's scared of everything. But anyway, we're dragging him through. I'm dragging him through the store. You know, he's dragging his heels. He's getting louder and louder. And we got to the point where you could see the glass doors to go outside. He jerked his hand out of my hand, threw himself on the floor, starts kicking and screaming. I mean, textbook perfect fit. With people coming in the doors and going out the doors. And you know how it is in department stores at the mall. You know, not a lot of space and people have to walk around him. And my first reaction was a normal parent reaction. Man, this looks awful. They're going to think I'm such an awful parent. And then I reined myself in and told myself, it's not about what people think of me. It's about how I take care of my son. I care more about him than the parents. So I had this little talk in my head to myself. Took a deep breath, stepped back. Sherry's standing about 5 feet over there holding the girls, looking at him. I looked over at her and I said, well, now that's probably one of his best fits ever. And several of these adults standing around laughed at that, and so they kind of gathered around. And they started commenting on, like, that's perfect. I mean, you could film that. That would go on TV. I mean, all I had to say was that one thing, and then there's all these comments. And he stops, and he lays there a little bit, and he sits up, and his head's down. And he stands up, and he heads out the door. And we just followed him all the way to the car. He never threw another fit. Now, was that embarrassing to my child? Yeah. It started out being really embarrassing to me. But then I let the focus be on my child. And this is what I'm talking about as natural consequences. When you get to be that age and you're trying to bully your parents by doing something in public where you know they're going to respond differently, he knew he couldn't get away with that at home. But he's in public. So this is a standard child manipulation. Children are way more intelligent than we often want to give them credit for, but also know way less than we want to give them credit for.
You know, now that I think about that, that's probably where all his social anxiety came from. There you go. Glad you're working with him now on that.
No, I can show you that when he was about a day old.
Oh, I know.
He
poor
was
guy.
born with
He
it.
was very shy, very introverted.
Which is why that was a perfect natural consequence, because he is shy, introverted, worried about what people think, and now people he doesn't know start making comments about his behavior. He's out of there. And realize, okay, he has responsibility for how he acts in public.
But also he learned he had control. When he sat up, quit throwing his fit, stood up and walked out of that building, he was in charge of himself. We didn't have to do anything else. It was done. I don't believe in public shaming of your children. That was not public shaming. That's a natural consequence. There's a huge difference. You don't go on Facebook and post the pictures of him throwing a temper tantrum. You let him work through that. Now,
We should probably have a session on social media.
yeah, we probably
We're
should.
not, we didn't plan it,
Yeah.
but that's becoming
That's a
a huge
whole
thing.
thing on its own. Okay, we used the term helicopter parent earlier. Helicopter parents are parents who will not allow their child to suffer any natural consequence for their behavior.
For example, they make a bad grade at school because they didn't study for a test.
It's not their fault.
The parent will be up there insisting the grade be changed, insisting that the parent take the test for them, going to the principal, insisting the teacher get fired for having the nerve to give their child a bad grade for a test just because the child didn't study for the test. We'll go talk to the superintendent. We'll go stand before the school board. I am not making this up. This is how helicopter parents act. Their child is perfect in their eyes, and anything that might upset their child in any way other than the parent themselves, who has the right to upset them, the parent is viciously going to oppose that.
Now, it goes further, though, in that that parent will also not discipline for fear of hurting their feelings, will put off discipline that's needed, give them how many thousands and bazillions of chances, and then when they have an assignment, coach them through the assignment. Those are all ways of helicopter parents. Another example of that is doing your kids' chores for them.
Now, you give them chores, but then you let them out of it.
But you
doing
don't
it for
follow
them.
through. You don't let them learn to be responsible. Because you know they're just kids and they got to grow up before they can be responsible. Well, I'm telling you, if you don't give them some responsibility now, They won't know what that means when they're grown.
See, I would have loved to have had a helicopter parent,
Oh, yeah.
especially when it comes to homework. I still hate homework. I hate homework for the whole world. I mean, I would love, actually was about 6 months ago, talking to people, trying to get an activist group up to try to assault the school boards in the area to make them reduce the extravagant amount.
Don't say assault.
In a social activist way.
Okay.
But we were going, I mean, you can change this. I know exactly how to change this. And I would have had a lot of parents and massive amounts of child support to make this happen until Sherry totally pricked the bubble by saying, well, yes, you know what the parents will do with all that extra time. And she's right. That's just more time spent out on the ball field. And that would probably be my next task, is let's do something to, I hate to pass a law because that's people trying to control other people, but I'm perfectly willing to try to control other people here. These poor kids are being made miserable by spending 4 hours a night out at the ball field, 12 to 20 hours a weekend at the ball field. These are undisciplined parents that are doing this.
You didn't do too bad. Your soapbox. You didn't do too bad.
I wonder when you told me not to
I
talk about.
know, but I'm about to hit that. You ready? Because we need to move on if we're going to hit this other part.
Let me finish homework.
Okay. Go ahead.
Because this actually ties up the whole consequences thing. A very common thing that helicopter parents do is their children's homework. Now, I do think it's improper for the child to have so much homework assigned to them. That is cruel, and I'm not sympathetic to teachers who can't teach, even though I know it's because of all the other stuff they have to do in the classroom. They don't have time to teach, so they send it home for the parents to have to do. Yeah, I might as well homeschool them if you're going to do that. But the parents then do the homework. At what point is the child going to learn the lessons? When do they learn their grammar? When do they learn their math? When do they learn their history and their science? When the parents are doing it. And no wonder the parents get really bent out of shape when the child does poorly on a test, because the parents know the kid knows that because the parents did the homework for them. So what they really need is to be able to allow the parent to go take the test for the child. And then everybody would be happy.
But wait, I don't do my kids' homework. I just look over it and correct and have them correct all the ones they missed.
Okay.
12 times. Until everyone's right.
Well, that sounds like a miserable home life, but okay.
That way they get the best grade in class.
Okay, and they also learn it.
Does that make me a helicopter parent? If I stand over them and make sure they get them all right?
Well, I think that kind of... I could make a case for or against, but if I was that child, I'd want to go live in another home.
Well, I didn't say it wasn't torture. I just said it.
Yeah, it just sounds like torture. For everybody. For the parent as well as the child.
For everybody. Okay.
Now you can jump into it.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. The thing about helicopter parents is don't be one. If you don't know what that is, do some research. Figure it out. Okay. By the way, if you're a helicopter parent, you're not giving them any choices. You don't have to because you're doing it all. And you're exhausted. And you really don't necessarily like your kids because you're exhausted, because you're doing everything for them. Okay, we're going to take the last bit of time, and we're going to talk about what is normal, a little bit of development and how that moves through with the kids. Now, he's already talked about discipline, so you can see where discipline plays into that. But a lot of times we get discipline and punishment mixed up. Sometimes we get training and guiding mixed up, so we're going to kind of work through that as we talk about development. When a baby's born, until they're about 6, 7 months old, pretty well you're meeting their needs. There's not much, you're getting the discipline. Learning how to get up in the middle of the night, changing diapers when they cry, you're getting the discipline. You're not really doing much other than meeting their needs, making sure they're fed, dry, content. They don't have to be happy. They don't know what happy is. They know content or not content. Okay. And then after about 6-7 months, they become pretty mobile. They start figuring out how to crawl. Then they start learning how to walk. They learn how to stand up and fall. Well, they do if they don't have too bad of helicopter parents. They learn how to develop normally. Once they become mobile, now your work starts. Because now you're going to have to develop that first word that they learn besides mama and dada. And that is no, except for our son. His words were, Heber, don't. Because he heard that because of Heather being disciplined at that point. He learned Heber, don't before he learned no. But no is that first word because now you're starting to tell them what they can't do.
You're setting limits.
You're starting to give them their limits, their boundaries, what gives them their safe guidelines. They are not ready to be reasoned with. You do not sit down a 1-year-old and have a discussion about their inappropriate behavior.
But some parents do. And maybe that's good for the parent. But the poor child, if you're using a nice tone of voice, the child will enjoy it. But they're not understanding what you're talking about. If you're using a not nice tone of voice, they won't get it. They don't know why they're in trouble. But they know their parents being upset with them.
Right.
And
so they're starting to develop that, hey, wait, people are talking to me and I'm answering them back. And if I say mama, mom gets all, woohoo, look at them, and dada. I taught mine all to say daddy first. Because we have the rule, whoever they ask for has to go take care of them.
So 5 o'clock in the morning, the baby's standing up in the crib, wants a bottle, saying, da, 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 da. So I had to get up and go get the bottle for him. Yeah. She beat me on that one.
But they learn that brings a good response, right? When they say mama or daddy. Yeah, we're excited. And so we start talking to them, and they get their little words, and they learn baba, and they learn nani, and all these other weird things that all these little guys say. And we know what they're talking about because they're ours. But then we have to start giving them their parameters. So we start saying no, don't, stop. And they learn the negative words, too. Our son and daughter-in-law decided they were not going to use the word no. Just weren't going to use it. That's too harsh. That's too negative. I said, okay, well, how are you going to keep them from doing, touching the stuff you don't want them to touch and keep? We're going to say, uh-oh. So every time, she taught her to touch something, they go, uh-oh. She'd be like, So one day she's at my house and she spills her milk, and I say, uh-oh, and she's crying. She's a mess because she thinks she's done something really wrong and she's going to get in trouble. I said, don't use it. They figured out their son, it had to be no, really loud because it wasn't going to work. Uh-oh didn't work on him. I don't think uh-oh works on her anymore either.
One of the things to watch out as a young parent, many of y'all already missed this. I did. I didn't know this. But when you start putting the parameters around your child, you can do this, you can't do that. You're laying down the boundaries, and the child crosses them. They don't understand boundaries, and they're curious. And if they're healthy, if they have the right amount of intelligence, they're going to want to see what happens when I do this. And parents take it as a personal affront. Why did you do that to me?
You disobeyed me.
Yeah, and the parent then makes it about themselves. People, we should not ever do that. The child's not trying to do anything mean to us. They're trying to explore their world.
Exactly.
Well, now after we've said, no, don't do that 12 times, we're frustrated. Child's wanting to see how many times can I do it. You know, they may be good for 200. We need to work on our patience. So when's it get to be about me? Remember the self-care we talked about yesterday? That's when it gets to be about you. When you put the kid down for a nap, when you put the kid down to sleep, take good care of yourself. But when you are chasing the child around, it's not about you, not if you're parenting. It's about the child.
But how do I not turn into that helicopter parent if it's all about the kid?
Because we have the concept that I am instilling discipline in this child. And so as they are able to do things, I expect them to be able to do things.
Exactly.
When they're not able to do it,
You re-instruct.
you know, when I stick them down on the floor and they're crawling and they crawl into the kitchen and I pick them up, take them back into the living room and say, nope, don't go in the kitchen. And they crawl right back in there and they look over their shoulder and smile at you. They're playing a game. They are not disobeying. They do not understand disobedience. At some point, they have to come to learn disobedience, but probably not when they're crawling. That's expecting too much of a child. And this is understanding normal. What is a child capable of? You know, I talked about a child being able to get themselves up, out of bed on their own. 12 is an appropriate age for that. Not 11, not 10, definitely not 6.
Can they get themselves out of bed?
Well, they can't necessarily wake themselves up.
Oh, okay. I was just being sure I understood what you're saying. You mean set their own alarm, have nobody wake them up.
Yeah,
Okay.
For them to know when to put themselves down to sleep, when to get themselves up, get themselves ready, show up. They're not able to really do that consistently until they're about 12.
Okay, and I'm going to jump in here because we've gone from 2 to 12. But,
And sometime we've got to talk about the sweet spot.
yeah, got to talk about the sweet spot. Okay, but I'm going to address something that Stephanie brought up. Stephanie said, but, when you've told them 20,000 times and, for the last 6 years, you're going to brush your teeth and take your bath and go to bed. What happens if they don't? What happens if they don't? What is your responsibility as a parent at that moment? Are they in danger if they don't take a bath? Seriously, are they in danger if they don't take a bath? Okay. Are they in danger if they don't brush their teeth? No, they got stinky breath. They might lose their teeth, but they don't have a danger. Okay. What about if they don't put their pajamas on? What if they're just in their underwear? Does life end? Sometimes we take on the battles that aren't ours that we need to take on. Yes, you're trying to teach them those things. A great way to do it is to set them down and say, do you know how to brush your teeth? Yeah. Do you know how to take a bath? Yeah. Do you know how to put your pajamas on? Yeah. Great. I'm going to quit nagging you about it. But by the way, when we get up in the morning, if you haven't done those things, we don't get to go where we need to go until that's done. We don't get to go to the park. We don't get to go wherever, because I'm not taking you out like that. You put the responsibility back on them. Don't stand up, because the person who's the most miserable at the end of the night is you, the parent. Because you're the one worn out from all the yelling and the screaming and the standing over them and the beating them on the head. And why? So he recommended the book, A New Kid by Friday. That's what it talks about. Give the responsibility back to the kid. When they're 2 and 3 and you're teaching them to brush their teeth, yeah, you got to kind of give them some guidance, right? You got to stand over them, make sure they're doing it, not smearing the toothpaste all over the mirror, painting a pretty picture on the wall. That's all happened at our house. You have to stand there kind of watch them. When you notice that they can do it completely, neatly, within your parameters, great, you're on your own. I shouldn't have to stand over top of you.
I think it's important for parents to consider fairness to themselves as they're parenting. And one of the best examples is when you have a child, especially a toddler or preschooler, and you're trying to train them, take one thing a week. One a week. And give them a whole week to learn it, because that's about how long it takes. Because a child, when they're one, their brain kind of flushes itself every hour. So you're like, they know better than that. Well,
And
no,
when
they knew
they're
better than that
14.
an hour ago.
And when they're 14.
We may do a whole thing on teenagers at some point. Some people have asked for it. They're a whole different animal. Some of these concepts will still work with them. But so many parents, they'll have like 12 things they're trying to teach all at once. And the kid can't keep that many things in their head. And what you're trying to do is create a habit in the child. And they don't have a habit until they've done it the right way enough times that they just automatically do it. That'll take them about a week. So once they've learned that, you move to the next thing, and you move to the next thing. And if what you're doing is just as you notice something, getting bent all out of shape, well, that's about you, that's not about the child. So you might even want to sit down and make a list of the things you're trying to teach a child at 1, the things you're trying to teach them at 2, the things you're trying to teach them at 3, and take those one at a time. And when you teach them, move to the next one. Because most of these things are not life-threatening, so you've got time to do it. And if you look at it appropriately, if you're diligent, you have 18 years to get them ready for adulthood. You don't have to do it all in the first 2 or 3.
And I think that the other thing is we allow other super parents guilt us, make us feel like we're not doing a great job because we look over there and they're like, all sitting perfectly in the church pew and all the little hair's all done right for the girls, and the boys have their little ties and cute hats, and you're looking down and saying, well, at least they got shoes on. They do, don't they? Yeah, okay.
Okay, sometimes parents' children is their hobby. So they put more into it than the rest of us.
They're also more worn out.
And then, I want to warn y'all about this. And then you have the parents, frequently of an only child, which is a lot easier when you have 2 parents intensely focused on one child. But you'll have the parents of what we consider a compliant child. That's a personality type. Compliant children just do what their parents want them to do.
They're sweet.
Till they're teenagers. But
they're loving.
they want to please you.
They're so sweet.
As soon as they learn the rules, they'll follow the rules. So those parents are usually super critical of all the other parents who don't have compliant children. They may have a strong-willed child, they may have a shy child, they may just have a normal child. None of those children work the same way a compliant child does. So a compliant child makes a parent look like they know what they're doing, and actually they know less than other parents because they haven't been challenged the way that the other parents have been.
Yeah.
So if you're a parent and you have other parents coming up to you criticizing your parenting, we'll try to be gracious about it. I just laugh in their face and say, oh, you so don't know what you're talking about. You know, and then, quote me and send them to me. They can be mad at me.
All right. And a couple of other little things on the 18 months to 3 that we'll touch on real quick is this is the time they're starting to really develop their personality. This is when they're starting to explore their world. This is when you're going to be doing a lot of that training and that yes and knowing. And this is that time that they start their independence, when they realize they're not permanently attached to mama's hip, that they can voice their opinions, when they can stomp their little foot and say no to you, like he said last night, and just start being a kid. And when that happens, instead of taking it personal, you allow them a little of that freedom. You still got to keep them in their guidelines. You still got to help train them. But you don't get worked up when they look at you and stomp their foot and say no. Because that means they've just paid attention to you. And they've just learned those words from you. And so you start from there. Now.
And please don't spank them when they say no. Poor little kids. They're trying to imitate mama and daddy, and they're trying to be a big person, and they get in trouble for it. That is so unfair. Now the sweet spot. From about 6 to 11, children take probably the minimum of parenting. Now, if you have a child 6 to 11 and it seems to be wearing you out, you're probably working too hard. 6 to 11, children do not require a whole lot of parenting.
They require a lot of reminding.
They need a certain amount of spot instruction. This one particular thing we're going to work on. But it's not like a 3 or 4 year old that needs like almost everything taught to them. 6 to 11, they can get themselves up. They can, not wake themselves up, but get themselves out of bed, dress themselves, go to the bathroom by themselves, brush their teeth. If you've taught them, they can feed themselves properly, as in prepare their own meal and get it to their mouth and get their books together and get on the bus or get in the car to go to school. They can do all of that if you allow them to. Now, along about 11, there is another developmental stage, deals with the frontal cortex developing, which is associated with moodiness. A normal 11-year-old will have like 6 months of just being depressed, angry at the world, hopeless. That's normal. We didn't know that when our oldest hit that point. We just gave up on her and said, we don't know how we failed, but we'll work on the other two. And then a few months later, she grew out of it. So you have stages. It helps to know the stage.
Yes. Okay, the little ones are about to come in. I'm going to recommend a movie, and I rarely recommend any kind of a movie. But if you have kids from the ages of about 4 and a half, 5 on up through about 11, 12, and they really are struggling with their emotions, like getting them under control, not understanding them, Inside Out.
Excellent movie.
Excellent movie. I use it all the time. Great question. If they've watched it, asking the question, who's running your control panel right now? And when they can tell you, ask them, well, why'd you let them be in charge? And let them explain it. There's nothing wrong with the single emotion. That's what the whole movie's about. Everybody has them. They all have a purpose. But who's going to be in charge and what are you going to do with it when you have it? Excellent, excellent movie. That it? We done?
Now you got to go back to your place.
Yeah, because here they come.